Hi everyone, I'm Tom Granger and I'm here today to talk to you about breathing, meditation and creativity. But before we get started, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Fearne and everyone at Happy Place Festival for inviting me to take part. I hope I can make it worth your while now that you've clicked this video. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the most useful things that I've learned over the last couple of years on my research into breathwork, meditation and creativity. It is an interactive workshop, so if you want to grab yourself a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, it can just be the back of an envelope. We're not making any representational art, we're not trying to make anything looks like anything else, we're not trying to create beautiful things, we're just going to be scribbling today, so don't be put off if you feel like you're not good at drawing or anything like that. In terms of who this is for, if you're a beginner, you'll get loads out of it, and I'm hoping that if you're intermediate or you've been meditating for years, you'll still get loads out of it, because we're going to be talking about it in slightly different ways than maybe you're used to. So yeah, we'll be able to bring some of that beginner's mind. So I am Tom Granger. I am a illustrator and sometimes graphic designer, sometimes writer, depending on who I'm talking to. So I help mostly sort of healthcare and nutritional and wellbeing businesses represent how they look artistically and how they sound in words and stuff like that for their brand. And more recently, I've had a second career as an author of creative humour books. So about 5 years ago, when everyone was getting colouring books and you kept given colouring books for your Christmas and birthday presents, I was one of those people making colouring books. I made a book called The Colouring Book for Goths, the world's most depressing book. And unlike other colouring books that are designed to help you achieve a state of mindfulness or calm, the Colouring Book for Goths is designed to be coloured entirely in black to help you achieve a demeanour of aloof cynicism. So it's basically around 100 pages of just different black things that you can colour in. So you've got a power cut here, or the night sky in a heavily polluted city. So yeah, just a series of very depressing things. And this is my favourite, a panda in witness protection disguised as a black bear. And then that led to a series of other kind of interactive and creative humour books. So I did a book called The Breakup Journal, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a journal that you fill out when you're going through a breakup. So whether you're kind of assessing, what was the relationship, what did it mean, was there some good you could get from it, and how do you feel now, and just going through all of those emotions that you go through during a breakup. And it was intended to be a humour book, but I have had people get in touch with me and say that they found it really useful, which is unexpected but lovely to hear. And there's a kind of happier ending to this series of interactive books with a book called the Love Scrapbook, which is a book that you buy for your partner and you fill it out with all of your in-jokes from your relationship, and it kind of absorbs all the funniness and silliness that you two have. And so yeah, you can see we're making collages with all the gig tickets or designing each other matching tattoos. And there's some pages that I can't really show you because they're a bit rude. And it kind of becomes a horcrux that absorbs the soul of your relationship. That's how I like to think of it. And you can see the themes of these three books and how they intertwine. They're all creative and they invite creativity from the user. They're interactive in that sense, and they also all share the theme of emotion. So the Colouring Book for Goths, you're trying to embody and instill the emotion of melancholy, albeit not intended to be taken seriously. The Breakup Journal, you're attempting to kind of overcome the emotions of a breakup. And in the Love Scrapbook, you're trying to communicate the emotion of love. And all of those themes that I was working on came together for my last book, the which is called Draw Bereah, The Art of Breathing. And it's an interactive creativity book that teaches people how to meditate and do breath work, and also how to draw. But it teaches those things through drawing, except for drawing, which it teaches through meditation. So it kind of comes full circle at the end. And you don't need to have read this book, you don't need to know anything about this book, but it's just to give you some background on the exercises that we're going to be doing today and the reason that I kind of teach meditation this way. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned my bedroom doesn't always look like this. I've attempted to sort of bring the festival to you guys with some bunting because of our strange circumstances. Okay, so why breathing? Why would we do breath work? Why does it work? What can it do? It's probably easier for me to show rather than tell here. So at the beginning of this, I was blowing some bubbles, and I'd just like you to have a go at pretending. If I was there with you, I'd have given you one of these. That's what I normally do. But just have a go at pretending to blow some bubbles as though your tip of your finger is the bubble blower. And just using your imagination now. I'll try and blow some bubbles to create the effect. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, so just noticing, just do it one more time, and this time just noticing what you're having to change in your breathing to create that effect. So you're probably having to slow down your breathing, and that's making your breath longer. And you're probably having to inhale more oxygen to create that reservoir of breath for that exhale. And you're probably having to breathe more slowly. You're probably quite conscious of making that breath smooth compared to how your normal breath might be. And you might find that the ratio has changed. So the length of the inhalation is now shorter versus that long exhale. And that's just 4 or 5 variables that we can change in the breath. And why that's interesting is, if I just ask you to take your 2 fingers and just feel your pulse, just see if you can get a sense for your pulse. So just checking the sort of tempo of your pulse, feeling the strength of it maybe. And just see if you can hold your pulse like you would hold your breath. Just for 1 beat. Really try. And we can't do it. It's impossible to do that. And why that's interesting is the breath and the pulse are both part of what's called the autonomic nervous system, which is all the parts of your body that are keeping you alive without you having to think. So your blood pressure's constantly fluctuating depending on how you're moving, your gut's constantly moving the food around, you're absorbing everything, and all of that's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And the breath is a part of that system, so we don't have to think about breathing, it just happens. But unlike all of the others, unlike the pulse, if we compare that trying to change the pulse in any way versus that really nuanced control you had over your breathing. And by changing the breath, by changing those variables of the breath, we can change the autonomic nervous system. And why this is so interesting and important, it's an example of the body to mind relationship. So we know we've got a body, we know we've got a mind, and we know they're kind of one thing, they're 2 sides of this coin of being. But by changing things in the body, we can change the mind. So if we just do a little experiment now, and if you take that pencil that you got at the beginning and just place it between your molars. So behind you, maybe your 2nd or even your 3rd molar. Not trying to bite it, just holding it there. I'm going to take mine out just while I explain what we're doing. But they did a study in 1988 where they took 2 groups of people, and the first group, both groups had to look at cartoons and decide whether or not the cartoons were funny. And one group just had to look at the cartoons, and one group had to look at the cartoons, but they were doing what you're doing now with that pencil. And you can probably guess which group found the cartoons funnier. It was the group that were doing what you're doing with the pencil. And the reason for that is that it's quite uncomfortable holding a pencil in your mouth like that on these little sensitive bits of skin at the edge of your mouth. So you begin to engage these muscles in your cheeks to pull them out of the way. And what you end up doing by accident is smiling. And so because these people were smiling while they were looking at the cartoons, their brain was receiving a signal from their body. Their mind was receiving a signal that the world is a funnier place, a happy place. And so then they interpreted what they were seeing differently than they would had they not been having that stimulus of smiling already. And so something that was happening in the body actually changed how the mind perceived the world. So the world that you're experiencing actually changes based on what you're doing with your body. And if you think that just a couple of muscles in your mouth can change the world to make it seem funnier, imagine what effect your whole body is having on your experience of the world. What's your posture doing? What's your breath doing? And where this gets really interesting is with breathing, because the breathing can be a full body experience. Every single alveoli in your lungs is sending multiple different bits of information to your brain about how you're feeling. And so by changing the breath, we can actually change how we're feeling in the mind. And we're just going to do this is the most simple possible kind of breath work we can do. So it's not going to be straining, we're not going to be hyperventilating or holding our breath or anything like that today. We're just going to be exploring the tiniest changes and how they can change how we're feeling. So if you take your left hand and place it over your heart, and your right hand and just place it on your belly just above your belly button. Just become aware of your breathing now. And just notice which one of those hands is moving the most. It might be the one on your belly, or it might be the one up here. Just where in your body are you breathing to naturally? And I'd just like you to invite yourself to breathe more into that right hand now on your belly, as though the oxygen can go all the way down to your belly button. We might have to relax the muscles of the belly to do that. So breathing in, the belly relaxes, the hands pushed out. And breathing out, just completely letting go. Breathing in. And we're not trying to force the belly here. We're just, because each time you breathe in, you'll find it's a little bit easier to move the belly, to relax the belly. And then letting go on the out breath. Okay, so making this your last breath there. And just noticing, we've only done about 10 breaths maybe, maximum there. So just noticing whether you feel any different in your body, if there's an emotional tone to your experience, and whether your mind is any different, perhaps it's more quiet or still. And so just doing that, just by pushing our bellies out a little bit, relaxing our bellies a little bit, creating space in the bottom half of our body with the breath, what we were doing was we were actually using our diaphragm to breathe more. We were triggering the diaphragm more deeply. And that's as opposed to using our shoulders and our intercostal muscles up here to breathe in, which is what we often do if we're sat at a desk all day. And these two styles of breathing send a completely different message to the brain. So if we're breathing slowly and diaphragmatically, then we're sending a signal to the brain that we're in a safe, calm place. And we actually begin to feel more safe and calm. And the reason is that when we breathe diaphragmatically, we trigger what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system. So there are two parts of this autonomic system that we're talking about. And the sympathetic half is the part that switches your muscles on. And the parasympathetic switches the muscles off. So the more active the parasympathetic nervous system is, the more calm and relaxed we feel. And why we kind of need stuff like breathing to give us this is because if someone tells you to just relax, it's not something you can really do, because relaxing isn't a doing thing, it's an undoing. And the more we can stimulate that parasympathetic state, the more naturally relaxed we become. And why this is so key for meditation is because not only do we feel more relaxed, but we begin to sort of light up what are called the vagal nerves, which connect all of the different internal organs together. And they're almost entirely parasympathetic. So they're all kind of connecting the heart to the lungs, the kidneys, the gut, and all of these things are talking to each other all the time. And when we're safe, our body isn't having to look out for threats. So it begins to look in for how is it going to heal itself? How is it going to digest the nutrients in this food? And so this internal knowledge inside our torso kind of lights up the deeper we breathe with our diaphragm. And why that's so key for meditation is that if we enter this state before we go into meditation, when we try and focus on our sensations of our breathing in our body, there's actually more sensation for us to feel, because those internal pathways are alive with information. Okay, so we talked quite a lot there about the body to mind relationship and all the information coming from the body and changing how the mind feels. But now I'd like to talk a little bit more about the opposite direction of information. So we've all had that experience where somebody mentions food to us and we begin to feel hungry. Our stomach actually rumbles at the mention of food. And why that's so interesting is because the food isn't there. The food that we're experiencing exists only in our mind. Yet this object of your imagination is triggering a real visceral felt effect in your body. And this is happening all the time. So whenever we're thinking, that imagination, the objects of our imagination are having an effect on our current existence, our current state. And it's not always as innocuous as food. We're often thinking about negative things, like a negative thing that might happen in the future, or going over something negative that's happened in the past. And that's very normal, and that's our body trying to protect us from a negative future by showing us how to avoid it, or that we should avoid it. Or it's our body trying to protect us, or our mind rather trying to protect us by going over what we can learn from that negative experience in the past. But when we begin to ruminate on these things, it has an effect on us where we become tense. We stop breathing and we just become chronically tense, and that sympathetic system becomes really hyperactive. And the opposite to doing these things is mindfulness meditation. So becoming aware of the present moment without judgment, which is the opposite of being lost in rumination about the past, or lost in sort of fretting about the future, and becoming present. And it's a skill. It's not something we can just go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that then from now on. It's something we have to train. And I'm just going to give you a little flavour of what it's like. So we're going to draw something that looks like this on our paper, and I don't know if you can see that, so I'm going to put something on the screen now. So it's 2 lines that down the middle of your paper, which end up making 3 columns, and then 7 dots in each column coming down, and they're kind of in line with each other. And then just writing at the bottom, past, present and future. So we end up with 3 columns with 7 dots each. And while you're drawing that, I'll just give you an insight into why breathing is used as an anchor in meditation. So there's 3 key reasons why breathing is so key for meditation. Number 1, your breath is always there. It's always with you. You can't leave your breath in the car or lose it like a set of keys. It's always going to be there. So it's always accessible. And the second reason is it's always changing. So it's always in a state of what the Greeks would have called flux, or what the Buddhists would call impermanence, where there's always something in the breath that is unfolding, that we can be curious about, that we can bring our attention to. And as such, it's always present. And so the third and final one is, as we saw at the beginning, how connected our breathing is to our emotions. So our emotional state, if you were an actor and you were doing a scene and you didn't have any lines, how you'd probably communicate the emotion that your character was feeling is through breathing. You know, if you were, you know, this kind of full body method acting, I suppose. They'd be using their breath to kind of show the audience how they're feeling, because we know from how somebody's breathing how they're feeling. And another example is with kids. When we want to show a kid that they've got our attention or that they're doing something we're interested in, we kind of go, oh! You know, and that's a style of breathing, and it's so ingrained in us to know what that means, that child who can't even speak yet understands communication through breath. So the breath is always there. It's always changing, and it's a window for ourselves into how we're actually feeling. So if you've managed to draw your columns, what we're going to have a go at doing is not thinking by remaining present on the sensations of air coming in through our nostrils. And it's quite a subtle sensation. Just have a go at feeling it now. And if that's too difficult for you to feel, you can just focus on the sound. And I'm going to demonstrate what we're going to do. I'm hoping you can kind of see this. So we're going to draw another little dot here at the present, and that's going to be our starting point. And my pencil is going to kind of show where I've been, or my pen rather, is going to show where I am. So I'm going to start in the present, focusing on the sensations in my nose. Okay, and my mind's almost immediately been taken away by thinking, and I was thinking about something I said at the beginning of this and wondering, did I say that right? So that's my mind being taken to the past. So I'm just going to move my pen all the way over to the past and then back to the present, and then I'm going to bring my attention back to my sensations in my nostrils. Okay, so I've just begun worrying about the time and whether we're going to have time to get everything done today in this video. So that's the future. I'm thinking, I'm planning ahead there. And then I'm going to bring my attention back to the present, focus once again on the sensations in my nostrils, and start again. So if you want to have a go at that now, and I'm going to do it with you, so I'll be quiet for a moment while you're doing that. So just noticing where your mind is, the nature of your thoughts. Are they in the past or the future? And just bringing it back to the present. They might be visual flashes of images or words that sound like your voice. Coming back to the sensations in the nose. Okay, so just making that your last brush stroke. What we end up with is kind of a map of how much our mind jumps around and away from where we are right now. And it demonstrates two things really. Number one, we can't not think, we're going to think, even when we're meditating, and even people who've meditated for years, you're still going to be dragged away into thinking. But it also shows you that we're not necessarily in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are a little bit like the breath in that we can have control over them sometimes, but for the most of the time it's just something our body takes care of. It's just another part of our experience, like sounds or colours. Our thoughts are just another part that we can be aware of. And what we're doing when we're training ourselves in meditation is training ourselves to have that perspective on our thoughts. And we do that by constantly trying to bring our attention back to the present moment, back to the sensory, the sensations of the body, and away from the verbal. And then we notice that our mind's wandered and we bring it back. So many people say to me, oh, Tom, I know you're really into meditation, but I can't do it. I just immediately think of other stuff. But if you immediately think of other stuff, and you then notice that, then you're good at meditation, because the point of meditation is noticing where the mind is and then bringing it back to the present moment over and over again. And when we do this over and over again, we're training that reflex to notice where our thoughts are, so that then in the rest of our life, you might be driving along the road and having an argument about something that happened 2 years ago in your mind, and you can just notice what's happening, notice the effect on your body, and decide whether or not you want to continue with that train of thought. Whereas perhaps if you hadn't meditated, you'd have just carried on, and it would have caused you stress and caused you anxiety and caused you stomach problems and all the rest of it. And so hopefully that's a useful way of explaining meditation. And what we're really doing there is noticing our thoughts and then noting what our thoughts are. So now we're going to have a go at another way of using our pencil to meditate that's altogether simpler and more kind of intrinsically rewarding. We're going to be drawing our breath. So I'll just demonstrate what that's like. It's almost like we're an artist and our subject is the breath. So we can draw a little starting dot, and then we're just drawing up as we inhale and down as we exhale. And we're just going to carry on doing that for a couple of breaths. And there's no right way of doing this. You might find yourself really questioning whether you're doing it right at the beginning. It's going to look different for absolutely everybody. And we're not really aiming for like perfect, smooth curves like that, because each breath is very different. And the more sort of chobbly and uneven your arcs become, the more likely it is that you're really paying attention, really drawing that breath as it feels. But you're the master of your experience, and only you'll know if you're doing it right. But the key is really just to draw up as you breathe in, draw down as you breathe out. It's that simple. So just before you start drawing the breath, we're just going to watch the breath for 3 breaths. It's almost like watching an escalator before you get on. So because we're allowing the breath to lead our pen, we don't want the pen to be leading the breath, because then we just end up kind of... We're trying to allow the pen to move as though it's controlled by the diaphragm and letting our breath be organic. So we're just going to place the pen in the starting dot or the pencil and just watch this next breath. And you might find that just becoming aware of the breath means you're like, oh, am I in control? And there's a bit of a moment where you're kind of fighting to let go. And to overcome that, just let this breath all the way out. And then observe the body's natural inclination to breathe in. And you can ride that almost like a wave, so just letting it out. Observing. letting it out, and this time beginning to move your pencil. You can have your eyes open or closed for this. You might notice a little pause after the out breath, and you might want to stop moving your pencil or draw a flat line to indicate that. Everyone's is going to look different. Okay, making this your last breath cycle. Last breath in, last breath out. And then just place your pen down and pay exactly the same amount of attention to this next breath. Letting it out, following that urge and just observing it every step of the way. And that is all meditation is. So Eckhart Tolle said, one breath in and out is a meditation. And so what you've just done, after you put your pen down, that is all we have to do when we meditate. But we can only meditate one breath at a time. And then our mind will get taken away. And all we've got to do is bring it back to this breath that's happening now. And you might find, if you just close your eyes and go into your body and just notice any difference now in how you're feeling versus how you felt before. You might feel more open or calm, or there might be no difference whatsoever. You can see from my drawing that my breath ended up getting deeper towards the end as I became more relaxed. It might sound like a new idea to be drawing our breath as a form of meditation, but it's actually an ancient technique. So you'll recognize this circle from various places. It's called the Enzo circle, and it's used in Japanese Zen Buddhism. And the artist that draws it waits with a kind of loaded brush until they observe the natural movement almost come through them to draw the circle. And they draw it in time with an exhalation. So this is a really old style of breathing. I'm just making it very easy and accessible. So we've talked a lot about where our attention is going and training our attention to come back to the breath over and over again. But I'm just going to invite you to have a play with your actual attention, with the kind of focus that you're giving something. So if I put this Enzo circle back on the screen, and I ask you to really pay attention to it, like I'm going to ask you questions about it later, or I'm going to ask you to pick it out of a lineup of similar looking circles. I want you to be able to find that circle again. So you might be really drawn to some of the details around the edges, if you can recognize those. I'm not really going to test you on any of this, but it's just to see what that's like to be focused like that. And then expand your attention to include the rest of your screen without moving your eyes away from the circle. And now expand it once again to include the computer or the phone that you're watching this on, but keeping your eyes on the circle And you can see where this is going. Expand it once more just to include the things around the screen, perhaps in the background or the foreground, whatever's in your peripheral vision now, just allowing it to enter your awareness. And one more time, just to the wider edges of the room now, or you might be outside. Just whatever you can see in the foreground, in the background, in the distance, the colours and the shapes. Just really noticing them, allowing them to kind of come into your visual field. And keeping your eyes still on the Enso circle, you can lift your hands up to the sides of your face so you can see your hands. And then just bring them backwards really slowly to roughly kind of where your ears are. And you'll be able to sort of see them slipping in and out of your perception. There's no hard edge to our vision, but just really expanding your awareness so you see both hands at the same time. Okay, and then letting that go now. What I'm really trying to show you here is that your actual attention itself is dynamic. It's not just that you can change what you're focused on, you can change the kind of attention that you're paying. And this is really where mindfulness gets interesting once we expand beyond the breath and into the rest of our bodies and we start doing open monitoring and stuff like that. But you may notice that when you got into that more expanded state, there was an almost felt sense of openness in the rest of your body versus that state where you're really narrowly focused on the circle. So we're just going to do another experiment, and this is a kind of another test for your attention. So in this image that I'm going to put on screen now, there's 3 deliberate mistakes, and I'm going to give you around 40 seconds to see if you can spot them. And I'll give you a clue, it's not that there's nothing on the placards. So see if you can find the deliberate mistakes in that crowd. So 10 more seconds. And just notice now what's happened to your breathing. So I'm guessing that your breathing was much shallower because you were so focused. And I'm guessing that your brows were a bit more furrowed, and maybe that you came closer to the screen, and that would have been changing how you were breathing as well. And I'm sorry to tell you, but there's actually nothing wrong with the image, nothing deliberately wrong with the image. It's really just to show you what it's like in your body when your mind's in that problem-solving, doing mode, looking for the problems. We're just going to look at that again, that image, and now see if there's 3 things in the image that you like. It might be the way somebody's been drawn, it might be the way somebody is looking at somebody else or something they're wearing, or the relationship between 2 people in the image. Something that makes you sort of feel nice. And you might play now, just expanding your attention to see the whole image. And I'm going to hazard a guess that that experience of looking for something that you appreciated in the image was very different. So not only can we change what we're paying attention to, and how diffused or focused our attention is, we can also change the reasons we're paying attention. So that first time we looked at this image, it was a problem-solving kind of style of attention that we're paying. And we can change it to a more curious style, a more appreciative style, almost like we're trying to appreciate a work of art. And that changes how our body feels. So all of these things are dynamic. And the last thing that is dynamic, if you look at this image of a pair of chess pieces, so you've got the king and the queen, and just have another go at looking at this image and see if you can see the hidden image. This time it's not a trick, there is actually something hidden in this image. So I'll give you a clue. She is in between the chess pieces. And some people see this thing straight away and some people take it a lot longer. But see if you can see it. And it's basically a yogi hidden in the middle with her arms above her head. And what's so interesting about this kind of image is that nothing actually changed in the image. Just what you were seeing changed. What you were projecting onto the image changed. And there's a really, really famous example of this from Gestalt psychology of the duck rabbit. So I'll show you that now. So you'll be able to see this as a duck with its bill on the left, and you'll be able to see it as a rabbit with the ears on the left. And if you can just play now, switching between seeing it as a duck and seeing it as a rabbit. And so is it a duck or is it a rabbit? Well, it's actually neither. It's just pixels on your screen, and you're projecting the symbol of duck and rabbit onto it. And this is where the similarities between meditation and drawing become really clear. So when you ask a novice artist to draw something for you, they will draw almost always, unless they're naturally gifted, they'll draw the symbol instead of what's actually in front of them. So if you put a cat in front of someone who's just learning to draw, they'll kind of look at the cat and then they'll come back and they'll go, well, it's got like a little cat nose. Oh, it's got whiskers. Oh yeah, eyes, little cat's eyes. And little cat ears. And what they end up doing is drawing the symbol instead of what they're seeing. They're drawing what their mind is projecting. And they might do what we've just done there, which is breaking it down into smaller symbols, but we're still drawing the symbols. And so there's a number of ways we can get around this by teaching people to draw. So for example, if we look at this picture of a yogi now, and I asked you to copy it, then you would probably end up, and you weren't confident with drawing, then you would probably end up not quite doing it because you kept seeing, oh, there's an arm there, oh, there's her eyes there. Whereas if we flip that image upside down, it just becomes squiggles. And so it's much easier to draw because we're seeing past the symbol. Or we can see this guy who's doing his upward dog, and if we put a grid over him and just break it up and draw the tiny little pieces in the grid, one at a time, that's a way of splitting up the symbol into tiny little pieces that don't have names. And finally, so this is a way of drawing, for example, something from nature. So if I asked you to draw this house plant, you'd end up drawing the leaves or the stem or the base, and you draw the symbols of those things. And one way around that is to actually do what we did when we saw the yogi in the chess pieces and see the negative space as the thing that we're drawing. And so these shapes in between all the leaves don't have names. So they're much easier for us to draw because our mind is out of the way, not projecting a symbol for us. And why this is so useful is because all the time in our lives we're projecting symbols onto the world, and we're simplifying the world when we do that. So Dan Siegel in his most recent book talks about an example of a child experiencing a dog for the first time. And it's this overwhelming sensory experience of smell, sight, energy, the movement of the dog, the feel of the dog, everything about the dog is new. And when me and you have that same experience of seeing that dog, we just project the symbol dog onto it and simplify it because our brain's trying to save us time. We've learned about dogs before, we know this is a dog. We can just see the symbol and everything's much quicker. And what meditation can do and what drawing can do is bring that curiosity back to what is actually, noticing the symbols of the mind, the verbs, the verbiage of the mind that we overlay onto reality all the time, and kind of becoming sublingual and more sensory. So the more we meditate and the more we see past the symbols, we become more deeply in touch with our own intuition, our own felt sense for reality. And when it's particularly bad when we begin applying these sort of reductive thinking styles of symbols to our lives, and we go, oh, that was rubbish, that year was rubbish. And of course it wasn't. There was some bits of it that were rubbish, definitely. But when we start labeling things like that in our mind, it's naturally reductive. So the last interactive experiment we're going to do, if you grab your pencil and pen again, and it doesn't matter if you're just going to draw over the drawings you've already done, we're just going to make a little list. So I'd like you to look at your pencil as though you've never seen a pencil before, and try and think of some new uses for your pencil. So it might be a tent peg, or it might be like a hair pin. What uses can you think of for your pencil that aren't a pencil? And I'm going to give us around a minute to do this, and I'll do it as well so that we're not so that I've got something to do. But there's no competition here. You're only in competition with yourself. So you can break it or smash it or take the lead out or the rubber off the end or the ink out of your pen. What other uses could it have around the house or in the garden or when you're on holiday? Okay, so wherever you're up to there, just placing your pencil down. And that's called a functional fixedness test. We see the pencil as having a fixed function, it's for drawing. But if we can stop seeing it as its function, we can experience it in new ways and think of new uses for it. We're not reducing it to the symbol of pencil or pen. And we're then, a whole new world of other things we can do with it can open up to us. And the functional fixedness test is a kind of classic psychological test of creativity. Don't worry if you didn't get many today, it could be to do with how you slept last night more than, oh, I'm not creative. But yeah, the more we can experience the things around us with fresh eyes, the more we can train ourselves to do that through meditation, the more creative we become. Because we're not reducing the world, we're expanding with it. So I'd like to leave you with the idea that you can think of new uses for your breath, that your breath doesn't have a fixed function. It's not just for breathing. The breath is also there for you to change your physiology, for you to change your mental state, and for you to train your awareness. So I hope that was of some use for you. If you enjoyed it, I have a YouTube channel called Draw Bereah, where I interview experts in meditation from around the world and breathwork. And I also have an Instagram at Draw Bereah, where I post little reminders to breathe and reminders for your posture every so often. And if you'd like to go to drawbereah.com, there's free meditations and stuff on there and free downloads for some of the drawing activities from the Draw Bereah book. But thank you so much if you made it to the end. Wow, awesome. Thank you for sticking with me. I know there's a load of fun stuff happening on this festival, so please enjoy the rest of the festival. And yeah, hopefully see you again.
If you like that video, there are loads more talks, classes and exclusive videos from the Happy Place Virtual Festival. So don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Do follow us on Instagram for constant updates and enjoy.